Hello! Welcome back. Today on the show, all kinds of fun stuff to get to. Take a quick look at Colby Covington, Joaquin Butley, and kind of an idea of what that fight might look like this weekend that's coming up. And, maybe we'll see what's next for some of these fighters. And I will do a brief check of the news in the combat sports world writ large. And then, generally in the UFC world, a couple of fights were announced over the weekend at UFC 310. And we'll get to all that good stuff. My name is Klein Wong, and this is Fightcraft. And thank you for being here. I greatly appreciate it. And if there's any way that you can support me, it is to just, leave a like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends. If you're one of my lovely friends who's watching this because they just they can't bear to put this old dog out of his misery just yet, well then thank you, especially big old hearts to you guys, and share it with your MMA fan friends who might actually have a little bit of interest in this. So let us and a gut flora in sight when you got Coke Zero with you. Let's get to it, right? Why bury the lead here? UFC 310 went down over the weekend, and it took place at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. Never been there. Glad we're not back at the Sphere. The Sphere is dope. I just feel like I don't remember anything from that card except like Valentina won. And it seemed like much ado about nothing. So taking a look at the results here, we'll just break it down right from the top. I'll kind of go through it quickly and see if there's anything else maybe to cover. Obviously, I'll take a couple of extra minutes to go into the important fights of the night that stuck out to me, give maybe my submission, KO, and fights of the night as if they matter. And, it's just fun. It's just fun to talk shit. Got a great call from my friend Durain last night before the fights kicked, or while the fights, the prelims were going on. It was great to catch up with him and, just talk a little bit of shit. Me and the boys. Me and the boy, the homie, used to work at Best Buy together, just in our fucking Blueberry Blues, getting lunch at Chipotle or Jersey Mike's and just talking about, like, whatever was happening in the MMA world at the time, You watch UFCs at his place, watch them at my place. We talked about, what did we talk about? Talked about a UFC we watched at my place way back in the day. If you guys were fans then or remember, it was Eddie Alvarez versus Rafael Dos Anjos for the lightweight title. That was fucking barn burner, and I missed those times. Hopefully we'll reconvene soon. We'll get him on the podcast. We'll shoot the shit. You guys can laugh at how he roasts me, and maybe we'll make it like a recurring thing. It'd be good to see him in person too. Durain, if you're watching, get your ass back to Tampa. So UFC 310 went down. First fight of the night did not disappoint. For not first fight of the night, like award, but like the first fight on the card. Kennedy Nzechukwu. I know I butchered that, and I have a feeling I butchered that on the last episode too. Defeats Lucas Brzeski in round one. It was a TKO. Brzeski was flattened out. Guy had, I want to say it was a cross that dropped him. No, it was a hook. He sets it up with the lead rear hand. Right, you don't throw a jab to set it up. So there's a little more travel time and a little bit more telegraph time to react for the opponent. But it did just what it needed to. It didn't land flush, but it opened up the door for that right hook from Kennedy. And Brzeski was floored immediately. And fell to his back and then just rolled over, eating a couple of punches by Kennedy. It was a great finish by Kennedy. Let's see what is next for him actually, because that was an interesting one. It was a heavyweight fight. He is 6'5", Kennedy Nzechukwu. Let me check let me get this screen shared here so you guys can take a look at what I'm looking at. Kennedy, and we'll resize this. Excellent. There we go. Show stuff. Kennedy is heavyweight, 6'5". I didn't know that beforehand, and they're heavyweights. They look big in the cage. You can always tell where they are relative to the fence, how they look next to the ref and everything. But he's a big boy. He's 6'5", walked in at 236. Tall boy, but not as thick at heavyweight as one might. There's different schools of thought on the subject. The limit is 265, and I believe the minimum is 225 for heavyweight. And so, out of Nigeria fighting, he came in, he got his first round TKO. Excellent knockout. kind of sucks to be him because it was a card full of finishes, full of great performances, and I wonder what might be next for him. So Kennedy is on a 2-fight, win streak. Coming off of Chris Barnett and Lucas Brzezinski here, he's obviously, you can see on the screen, 3-2 in his last 5. So I'm wondering what might be next for him. Let's take a look at the heavyweight rankings. And I could see, I definitely, I don't. Heavyweight's a weird division. It only takes a couple wins to really get up there, and looks like he was not ranked before this fight, right? So here's the top 15 rather of heavyweight. Shamil Gaziev. I mean, I think he could step up and take any one of those. I'd like to see him. I don't know if he could beat them, but I'd like to see him against any one of those top 15 opponents now. I think he came from light heavyweight, if memory serves. Let's take a look here. Talks about win at light heavyweight. Yeah, it looks like he used to fight until about early 2024. So he was at light heavyweight. He's at heavyweight now. Derek Lewis might be a far cry for him. I know Derek Lewis is on a little bit of a skid here, but I think that might be a bit too tall of an order. Maybe even Tai Tuivasa would be too tall of an order. The thing about those guys, too, in particular, and a lot of heavyweights, is they're not as consistent as you'd like them to be when they're basically below. Nowadays, I mean, anyone below the top 4, top 5, I tend to see as pretty inconsistent. I think number 5 there was Curtis Blades. That's a perfect example. They'll win 1 or 2, maybe even 3, and then they'll take a loss. And, it really doesn't take much to get into heavyweight title contention. Right now, of course, there's no, you have John Jones. You just had him fight Stipe. You have Tom Aspinall. We'll get to Cyril Gane. And, you have these guys who are pretty damn good, but we typically know what the heavyweight title picture is looking like. And so for Kennedy, I mean, great job. And it would be cool to see him, if he doesn't crack the top 15, it would be cool to see him get a top 15 fight and, get his shot at being ranked and getting an idea of where he really stands in the division. I wouldn't mind seeing him against Shamil Gaziev, and I wouldn't mind seeing him against Marcos Rogerio de Lima. De Lima's pretty good too, but he's also had an up and down kind of career over at heavyweight. If you want to fast track him, which it's heavyweight, so it's not like lightweight where like there's a difference between the 11 to 15 and then maybe 8 to 12 and then then there's even there's levels to number 4 to number 7, and then the top 3 are really, really shining above. Like you could kind of give him. I mean, would I be mad at a Marcin Tybura fight? No, I'd probably give that to Marcin Tybura when we do the breakdown. But I think anyone in the top 15 would be great for Kennedy to test his skills against. Excellent knockout there from Brzezinski. Of Brzezinski rather, and he showed a little bit of durability, like most heavyweights, not in the craziest of shape, and so I would hope that he doesn't get a main event spot or a fight at a place with altitude on it. Kind of going down the list here of the results. After that was Chase Hooper defeating Clay Guida. Man, this one was it was a fun fight. It was a cool fight if you like the grappling exchanges too, and if you really can appreciate that. You don't have to know to appreciate, right? You don't have to be like a trained jiu-jitsu fighter, but if you really are appreciating what's happening on the ground, and of course the fighters have to give you something to appreciate, right? There has to be constant action or even just interesting exchanges or transitions of position. Then I mean, you probably enjoyed this fight. I certainly enjoyed this fight. Chase Hooper defeats Clay Guida by armbar at 3:41 of round number 1, and man, it was just at the end there. It was just, I mean, it was clinical. It was awesome to see Chase Hooper really kind of coming into his own here. He's still a skinny guy, He's still a skinny young. He has that kind of that boyish young man face, but you can tell he's getting a little bit older. He's filled out just a little bit, and his jiu-jitsu has really been supplemented by his ground and pound. I don't know how well his striking on the feet is. We didn't really get to see too much of it. The fight obviously only lasted a little bit here, but it was really cool to see these grappling exchanges. He hit a really cool like hip toss kind of throw with Chase Hooper to get him on the ground, and with Clay Guida rather, and it was just it was tough to see Clay Guida, a veteran of the sport and a real pioneer of that division, take this loss. But I mean, dude, I have a feeling it's just going to become a thing that I say every episode here because it is just an undisputable truth of MMA. MMA does not care. The MMA gods do not care about your veterans. They don't care about your pioneers. They don't care about your favorites. They don't care about your legends. They don't even really care about your champions or the best in the world because the MMA gods are ruthless. They will feed your loved fighters, your beloved fighters, the fighters who give their blood and guts and sweat and tears into this craft and ply their trade in the octagon. The gods will feed them to the young. They'll feed them to a mismatch. They'll feast upon them by making them slip on a banana peel. It's I say it every week. So if you're a returning viewer, thank you, and bear with me while I go through this for another couple of seconds, but the young in MMA very often feast on the old. That's why Jim Miller is so fucking good these days. It's not, I mean, obviously good, skilled technically, but like so good to watch. And it makes his wins just a little bit sweeter when he's jumping the gilly or he's cracking with his hands, in a way that we haven't seen him do in either a long time or really, he had some good barn burners back in the day, but Clay Guida, man, might have to hang it up after this one, brother. This one was pretty indicative of probably where Clay Guida is at in the sport. Physically he's had a lot of wars, a lot of damage, always a foot on, pedal on the floor kind of fighter, very aggressive. And, he's an old guy too, man. It's what happens with these old guys, dude. And the juxtaposition here was so clear. Clay Guida and Chase Hooper, great grapplers, both of them. Clay Guida, of course, developed into a really fun brawler, right? He has that caveman hair and everything. And as Joe Rogan says, he drives like he fights, which is just wild and all over the place. It's an interesting one, that's for sure. It's something that I don't necessarily love to see, because I think that he's fighting a little bit past his prime, and I would like to see him hanging up with dignity. And there was a few guys on this card who you might like to see hang it up. And there's this notion on MMA Twitter. When I'm referring to MMA X.com social media, I'm gonna just keep calling it MMA Twitter because I think that rolls off the tongue a little bit more nicely, more cleanly. I'd like to see him hang it up. There's a notion that, you should never tell someone when to retire. It's like, fuck that. They should never have to listen to anyone. But I mean, you shouldn't voice your opinion? No, voice your opinion. Let these people know, especially, when fighters tend to have a warped mentality of their place in the world and their place in the sport and athletically, because they kind of have to, with Paddy Pimblett saying like, of course, I think I could beat Islam. That might sound crazy to some people, but I have to believe that because if not, why am I in here doing this? It's along the same vein of like, yeah, Chris Weidman will think that, because he snapped his shin and because he's lost a few and, because he's coming back, he's older, maybe his body's got more miles on it. Like he might still think that, I can still hang with some of these guys. And maybe in the gym he can, maybe his training partners, he just knows them very well, or maybe he just turns it on in the gym, or maybe, I would like to think that training partners are not giving their guys an easy look in the gym. They're preparing them the best that they can. But these guys are going to think that they can do it until something pretty significant is taken from them. And so, tell your fighters that you want to retire if that's what you believe. And I don't, judge anyone for doing that. Clay Guida here, if we want to take a look, 4-1 in his past 5 in the past 3 years, and 2 of them by finishes. He wasn't usually getting submitted, I don't believe. He wasn't usually, well, shit, actually. egg on my face, huh? 10 submission losses. I mean, to 15 submission wins. The guy's a great wrestler, great grappler, but, 43 years old in 155, which is often said and arguably the hardest division in the sport to make your name in. I think it might be time for Clay Guida to hang it up. Chase Hooper, on the other hand, Hooper did absolutely phenomenal. He hit a great hip toss to get Guida down, and it was just all Hooper from there. It was minus 1,300 favorite for Chase Hooper. I mean, what the fuck, dude? They gave our boy Clay Guida no respect on that betting line, and how could you blame him? How could you blame him? The guy's older. The guy has a style that has not developed as much as it should, as much as it should have even in his day, let alone compared to the meta of mixed martial arts nowadays. So I think it is time for Clay Guida to hang it up. Chase Hooper did a great job. There was a really interesting bit when they were on the ground there. He had the ground control, and he had Clay Guida covering up, and he's hitting like his ground and pound. And there was you could tell, first of all, as little as we saw from Chase Hooper on the feet here, he has developed his striking on the ground pretty damn well. He used to not have much on the ground when he first started. He was a way skinnier guy, very slick jiu-jitsu, excellent jiu-jitsu too, especially for MMA, but you could tell he was raw, and you could tell he's been working on parts of his game. Maybe that's hitting the switch and being a little bit meaner. Maybe that's just that killer instinct, but he has worked on his ground and pound, and he's picking his shots, and his shots are a little more accurate because of that. And there was a pretty damn good shot when he had, he's in like that mount, that S mount, while Guida's kind of on his side covering up. He's trying to turn over to get to his knees, and he doesn't want to do that because you have to kind of you're not going to be able to fully turn over while someone's raining punches down on you with your hands up. I mean, you can post on your head, but then it's like you're really taking shots anyway. So a lot of times you see guys, you might as well put your hand, at least one hand down while you cover to get up. And it's tricky business, right? You got to pick your poison here. Do I want to be totally defensively sound and try to get up by, maybe trying to get my head to the mat and then posting on my head to get to my knees to then get my hands down? But it's like you're taking shots anyways, and that's a less effective, more easily controlled way of trying to get to your knees when you're on your back or you're on your side and someone's on top of you raining blows down. And you saw this moment where Clay Guida was on his side, he's covering up, and there's kind of a rhythm to Hooper's punches, and he pulls back, and there must have been a fraction of a second where the punch didn't come back down, and it was maybe a delay. Maybe it was by choice by Hooper. Maybe it was just by proxy of him looking for a shot and kind of taking an extra split second. I mean, and we are talking split seconds here for Hooper to pick his shot. And Guida moved his hand kind of, I think maybe to check and just kind of see, and Chase Hooper's punch came down on Clay Guida cleanly, and that was a punch that you could really see was delivered. It was perfectly landed. There was a good amount of force into it, it looked like, and it definitely rocked Guida because then there was a little bit of urgency in him. He tried to get to his knees. Hooper, using that S mount, I mean, it's hard to do right here without like a dummy or, even just sitting down on the table, but using that S mount, you're kind of sitting on their ribs and you're using like your hamstrings and your groin, like your taint area to kind of like control and ride them. And it really, once you get a sense of it, it kind of helps you see or feel where they're going to go. And Guida trying to roll back to his knees, Hooper just positioning himself to get Guida back on his side, and decides to sit back for the arm. And you saw the control that Hooper had of the arm, of the wrist, and then by proxy like the forearm, and then that's kind of what you really need, right? We tell our students over at South Tampa Jiu-Jitsu, right? When you're practicing arm bars or you're teaching someone arm bars for the first time, when you're going for the finish, of course you can finish it without this type of control, but you want to think of a thumbs up, and you don't want their thumb to be lateral at all or horizontal at all, right? You want it to be straight up at the ceiling, and that way that kind of helps assist and force their elbow to be on your like your pelvis or your hips, and then you can really get the most of like the force from the fulcrum on their elbow, and it's a more secure tap. And you saw Chase sit back for the armbar. He had that control, and Guida is on his knees. He tries to kind of roll out of it, And Chase's control was so good, even just at the wrist and the upper and the lower forearm here, that thumb stayed up the whole time. And so there was really no rotation for Clay Guida to get. And he tried to maneuver out of it, and he maneuvered tighter into it, and then he goes back, and Hooper just sinks in the armbar and gets the finish here. So great work from Chase Hooper. You thought he was going to win. He won. Now let's see what's next for Mr. Hooper. Let me pull up Hooper's profile here real quick. Chase Hooper, he's 6'1 at 155. Tall boy. I knew he was skinny and tall, but tall boy. I mean, he's on a 4-fight win streak, you know. Lost by knockout back in 2022. Beat Fiore, beat Jordan Levitt, which was a great one. Beat Borshev, which was – I picked him to beat Borshev at the time, but it was definitely a tougher fight. And a tougher matchup on paper, at least, than maybe like Clay Guida. But, 3 submissions in his last 3 fights. In the first, 2 of them in the first round, 1 in the second, as you can see here. And then that unanimous decision, kind of getting that experience, that time, those minutes in the octagon to kind of help him. I'd like to see Chase Hooper take another step up, right? He's got a couple of names on his resume now. Chase Hooper not in the top 15 here on the ranking system, and I don't necessarily know who I would like to see Chase fight. I don't know if Chase Hooper is ready for someone in the top 15, but you never really know till you know, and they don't give tune-up fights. They don't really give easy fights to guys in the UFC. If you get one by proxy of them being like an old vet, that's one thing. But maybe Grant Dawson. I think Jalen Turner beats Chase Hooper. I think Paddy Pimblett, Benoit Saint Denis, Rafael Fiziev. I mean, yeah, those guys. This is what I'm talking about with lightweight. There's fucking killers at every turn here at lightweight, and it'll be interesting to see what they do with Chase Hooper. Very excited for his next steps in the UFC. Michael Chiesa defeats Max Griffin via rear naked choke in the 3rd round, and that was an interesting fight. If you remember the last couple episodes I did, I previewed this fight, and I really didn't know who was going to win this fight. I could have made arguments for either one of them, and at the end, I kind of thought Chiesa, and I really was not sure, because Max Griffin had a couple of good fights. I think I leaned towards Chiesa. I'd have to go back and watch. I leaned towards Chiesa, even though his last win was against Tony Ferguson. And then, before that, he beat Kevin Holland, old Big Mouth, which was kind of a surprise to me. I did not think he was going to beat Big Mouth, but then it was like, he lost to Sean Brady. Kevin Holland beat Michael Chiesa. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Why was I reading that wrong? Okay. Lost to Sean Brady, lost to Vicente Luque, and then he beat Neil Magny before that. So you were kind of, 2 wins in his last 5, and they were Neil Magny and Tony Ferguson. I did not have much hope for that, but he beats Max Griffin here the 3rd round with a rear naked choke, and it was pretty cool to see. I like Michael Chiesa. I want to like him more, and I was sad when he fought Carlos Condit and beat Carlos Condit, but that's the way of the sport. MMA feeds the old to the young. I'm gonna keep saying it. And Chiesa had what looked like a really slick fucking choke here against Max Griffin. Max Griffin now on the losing end of a couple of fights here. Let's take a look. Max Griffin lost to Michael Chiesa, beat Jeremiah Wells. Lost to Michael Morales. That was his only fight in 2022. Beat Tim Means, Dirty Tim Means, but Tim Means a little bit longer in the tooth as well, and lost to Neil Magny. And MMA math doesn't work, of course, but, Chiesa at least passed the test against Magny. And Max Griffin, where does he go from here? Not sure. I don't know if they even keep him around because they have a ton of fighters on the roster already. We're going to talk about some cuts I think should be made later, but Michael Chiesa, by all accounts, coming back with that submission in the 3rd round. Michael Chiesa had the body triangle, right? And then he gets Max Griffin flattened out, belly down on the canvas, and he keeps the body triangle. So that amount of pressure on like your stomach and your diaphragm and your ribs and all that shit. Wow, Michael Chiesa wasn't the cleanest. Wasn't the cleanest performance, but he got it done. You know, he got that arm under the chin, and he had the body lock on, or hit the body triangle, belly down, and it looked like he was torquing back. So it's like, you know, it's a choke. It feels like he's ripping your head off. That shit sucks. And Michael Chiesa, great performance here against at least a guy who's not on like an 8-fight losing streak like Tony Ferguson. So we'll have to see what happens next with Michael Chiesa. I don't know who he fights at welterweight. I don't think that the Sean Brady rematch really makes much sense, and I don't know if Chiesa should take someone in the top 15. Maybe Michael Morales or Jeff Neal. You know, I think Carlos Prates knocks him out. I think Vicente Luque, we've already seen that fight. You know, I think Vicente Luque has his way with him. Michael Venom Page might be a little too much for him, but it might be a fun fight. But we'd have to see. We'd have to see how this goes a little bit further. Joshua Van defeats Cody Durden by unanimous decision. Don't have much to say. Van did a great job. Kind of dominating, you know, here. Very, very, very lopsided performance here against Cody Durden. Don't have much to say here. Joshua Van, great work. Excited to see what's next for him. Let's see. Let me just look up Josh Van real quick. Josh Van. I mean, he called for that fight too, you know. Pretty great. Oh yeah, I forgot about this. I forgot about this when he fought Cherez and he's dropped down for that leg lock. That was cool. Did not have that same interesting finish here, but it was a great submission back in the day. Yeah, Josh Van, let's give him someone good here. Let's give him someone good. This one was a rough one. This next one was a rough one. Chris Weidman losing to Eric Anders by TKO in round number 2 at 4:51. You know, almost made it out of that second round. And what do you really say here? Weidman should hang it up. Weidman should hang it up, in my opinion. And it, obviously no one takes joy in saying that, like, someone who, you know, especially a guy like Chris Weidman, who I don't know if he makes the UFC Hall of Fame. I kind of feel like there should be, especially in MMA, there should be a little bit more forgiveness, or maybe just a separate section for the UFC Hall of Fame. I don't know what you would call it, but you know, the UFC stars, because this sport is so unpredictable and guys go through waves in their careers. And Chris Weidman is certainly on his run up to Anderson Silva. Me and Durain were talking about this. I mean, Chris Weidman had some, not the best striking in the world, but he had some really cool striking finishes, most notably that fucking elbow on Mark Munez as he kind of charged in and cut him right open. And Chris Weidman hitting one of these while he walks off. That was really fucking cool to see. And then, of course, that left hook against Anderson. That was awesome. You know, he went to war with Lyoto Machida, beat the shit out of post-TRT Vitor Belfort, and then great fight with Luke Rockhold leading up to the devastating mistake. Jack Slack's But Why Award of the Year was Chris Weidman's spinning back kick against Luke Rockhold. And Luke Rockhold, I think, really took a lot from Chris Weidman that night in that fight. And Weidman, you know, went on to a skid after that, and it was just, that was all she wrote. And I mean, Weidman kind of, I don't know if he was going for a leg lock there. Obviously, he went for the guillotine. Eric Anders made him pay, and Weidman just trying to go for what looked like that outside control, that like De La Riva control, or was it that Z-guard control, and fucking could not get it done. On his back already, goes for a leg lock on his back, so his hands are occupied, and Anders was standing up while he had this, and it's like, you need to really have those kinds of leg locks in if you're going to go for those and really, and like know that you have the next couple of seconds to commit to it without taking severe damage. And Anders just drills Weidman in the face, his head bouncing off the canvas, and Anders gets the win here. Let's see what's next for Eric Anders, if I may. Eric Anders. beat Jamie Pickett, lost in 2023 to Barrialt, and beat Kyle Dawkins, lost to Park Jun Young. I mean, Eric Anders, I don't really know. Again, we're looking at the top 15 of middleweight. I don't see much for him at the top 15 at middleweight. Jack Hermansson might be an interesting fight for Eric Anders. I don't know when the last time. Hermansson fought Joe Pyfer in February of this year, and that was a pretty interesting fight because I thought Pyfer all but had that in the bag. I thought he was really going to get that one, and Hermansson wins a 5-round unanimous decision, and, Joe Pyfer, a lot of great hype behind him, but that was an interesting one for him to lose. And, be interesting to see Hermansson versus Eric Anders. But Eric Anders is another one of those guys, like, I don't know what you do with him. If he lost to this, it would be probably his walking papers because, it's not that he's not a good fighter. It's just, and the UFC might keep him around because he had a couple of really good performances a couple of years ago, and maybe like to help build one of their own homegrown guys. But I don't know. I don't know what else to do with Eric Anders. I think he definitely needs another one before we start talking about top 15 guys. Maybe give him a top 15 guy, right? Maybe Jack Hermansson. But I don't know. Moving on, we have Brian Battle defeats Randy Brown by split decision. Cards on the table. I thought Randy Brown had this one. And then you saw Brian Battle missed weight, and he looked a little bit soft, and, both guys are fucking animals in there. And Brian Battle, true to his last name, he's going to come in there and battle it out. He's got that dog in him for sure. And a lot of really good performances. Randy Brown as well. Randy Brown's a bad motherfucker, dude. And I really thought he had this one. I thought that the miss in weight was going to be indicative of maybe Battle having not been as diligent in his training camp. And Battle ekes it out. And, it kind of sucks because he takes the hit, decides to stop cutting weight, maybe I think like 4 pounds out and 2-3 pounds out maybe. And Randy Brown goes through with the full weight cut. Brown will get a percentage of his purse, right? I think 15 or 20% is what they give guys who fight guys who missed weight. But you almost hate to see it because it's like, yes, I think they should get all the money they can. I think they should get maybe paid a little bit more. There's another conversation to be had there. But Randy Brown, taking this loss, dude, that really sucks because a loss kind of sets you back pretty damn far. And I wonder what Randy Brown is going to do next. And I'll get to Brian Battle in a second, but Randy Brown beat Zaleski Dos Santos. He beat Muslim Salikov. He was on that win streak. He had defeated Wellington Turman and had his last loss coming to Jack Della Maddalena. So you were like, damn, okay, Jack Della Maddalena, great contender, and we're still looking for the ceiling on this guy. And you just wonder what would have happened had Randy Brown been able to pull this fight out. I don't know, man. Oh, let's see what's next for Randy Brown. Randy Brown at welterweight. I don't think he should be penalized for this loss because, again, it was a close fight. It wasn't a finish, but I don't know if he fights someone in the top 15. They'll probably give Brian Battle Jeff Neal. Or I say give Randy Brown, Jeff Neal, and or Michael Morales, and give Randy Brown Carlos Prates, and let's see what he can do. Let's make him be on his shit for a guy like Carlos Prates, who will not only smoke cigarettes before the fight and after, but will bring it, just like Brian Battle brings it, just like Randy Brown brought it. But if he is off his game even a little bit, if he doesn't make weight, if he's not diligent about that shit, Carlos Prates will put his lights out. Carlos Prates has that power. So I think Brian Battle should fight Carlos Prates. And Jeff Neal's a higher ranked opponent, of course, than Carlos Prates. Prates at 13 and Jeff Neal coming in at 11. But I think you give Randy Brown another shot against give Randy Brown the shot that he would have gotten if he had won this fight against a ranked opponent. And let's really see what he can start doing. Or don't, keep him down there, let him just fucking feed on somebody, and then we'll move him into the top 15, give him what he fucking deserves, though. Brian Battle, a little bit disappointed in this, because you want to like these guys, and Brian Battle has had a great career in the UFC so far. He's fought, he had that draw against Ange Lusa, and he beat Kevin Jousset, and then obviously he just beat Randy Brown. He beat AJ Fletcher. He beat Gabe Green. Yeah, beat Takashi Sato. I think let's be forgiving, right? You don't know what's going on in someone's life. The missing weight is a little bit shitty, but he is penalized for that, as the UFC and the commission thinks are fit, and he had to give up some of his purse to old Randy Brown, and let's he won the fight fair and square, so let's give him a real contender next, and give him someone that he has to be on par for. I don't have much else to say about that one. Movsar Evloev versus Aljamain Sterling. This fight had people riled up in a way that I hadn't seen them riled up for Sterling in a long time, or maybe ever. He defeats Aljamain Sterling by unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board. And I don't know what to think about this one. First off, great fight. Possibly fight of the night. I'd have to really think about that, but possibly fight of the night. It was certainly more entertaining than Shavkat Gary, right? Shavkat Gary had a lot riding on it in an abstract sense outside the sport, but that was a crazy one. We'll get to that one in a second, but I think, like, as far as like excitement and crazy scrambles and exchanges, excuse me, I liked the Aljamain Sterling Evloev fight. Excuse me. I liked the Sterling Evloev fight more than I enjoyed. I had more fun with that fight than I did with Shavkat and Ian Gary. You hate to see it for Aljamain Sterling. Maybe he has a lot of haters out there. I think some fans think that Sterling is boring, and I think the fact that he won the belt off that illegal knee from Petr Yan sat poorly with a lot of fans, and Aljamain Sterling has come out and said, I don't want to win the belt like that. When he got his hand raised, you saw he was distraught. He was in pain. He was probably dazed, and rocked from that fucking knee that he took. And, he didn't necessarily want the belt. He was like, what the fuck is going on? It's not how I wanted to win. And say what you will, I don't think any fighter wants to win a fight like that, because in some way it's tangentially related to why you get in the sport. Why you get in the sport is like this, maybe this sense of, if you're a man, maybe there's a sense of like finding your masculinity and finding out what you're made of. Maybe it's a sense of wanting to prove yourself as well, whether to the general populace or to someone specific in your life. I've certainly felt slight echoes of all of those things, probably not to the extent that I think that a lot of guys have, but it's there. I think as a man, you're born with a sense to want to prove yourself. Whether that's physically, whether that's intellectually, whether that's artistically, or just financially, I think that to be given the result you wanted and not have achieved it in any of the ways, you're not ticking off any of those boxes as to why you wanted to achieve that result. And, that result was a goal at some point. It was an abstract moment in your head in the future that literally did not exist yet. And to get there and get what you wanted, not in the way that you want, I think that was pretty heartbreaking for Aljo. He took a lot of shit that night, especially to stay on the Petr Yan moment for a second, because he was like holding his belt, taking shots after, had a smile on his face in a picture that MMA Twitter saw, and of course they fucking raked him over the coals, being like, you were acting and you were doing this or that. It's like, you really can't prove that. And so of all the knocks you could have on Aljamain Sterling, of which I think there are a few, very few, to die on that hill rather behind your keyboard is pretty indicative of a casual mindset and people who don't know mixed martial arts but don't really know that mentality of striving for something. I'm not saying that I have that mentality like in the way that some of these like world champion top prospect fighters have it, but it's like if you've ever wanted anything, whether that was a promotion at work or maybe you were pursuing a romantic partner, or maybe you just wanted to prove something to yourself with like a personal project, maybe it's a film, maybe it's a song, maybe it's trying stand-up comedy or something like that, or just wanting to get out there in the world and like meet more people and change the perception of you. If you haven't really done any of those things, even to a small level, you can't really conceptualize what that's like at a bigger level, and then what that moment means. And it sucks. And, I wanted to see Aljamain Sterling get this win and keep surging at 145. And Evloev stays undefeated. I think he's 17-0 now, 19-0, something like that. And makes a good case to be a top contender. Makes a great case to be a top contender here. Wild scrambles here. We'll get to the decision in just a second, but there was a lot to be reviewed with the Aljamain Sterling Evloev fight. Aljo obviously heartbroken, but they seem to have pretty good rapport after the fight. They took a picture that's floating around on here we go. Aljamain Sterling, no excuses after the heartbreaking loss to Movsar Evloev. So Aljamain Sterling holding his head up like a man and taking the L. And I personally think that Aljo won that. I do. I'll make my claim right here. I think he won rounds 1 and 3, and I think Evloev probably won round 2 for sure. So I think it kind of comes down to how judges saw that third round, and you really can't. Well, I mean, what can we say at this point that hasn't already been said about judging in combat sports in general? Like, you have Adelaide Bird here, who, I don't know if you guys recall the boxing fight, but I mean, she gave her fucking scorecard away with the Canelo fight, and it's like, what are you watching? I don't think that you're not watching the fight. I'm confused as to how you're parsing data in your mind about what it takes to win a fight and who wins what. And, these fights in Vegas, I'm not really a conspiracy guy where I think about fights being thrown or judges being paid off. But I mean, shit like this happens, and it makes you wonder if there isn't some truth to that, at least a small percentage of the time. Aljo and Evloev. I mean, what's next for Aljo? Let's take a look at the rankings here as we move through this quickly. Okay, Ilia Topuria. Oof. Evloev, there we go. Evloev at number 5 here. And I believe these were not updated. These have not been updated since the fight. So you had Aljo at 9, coming off that win over Calvin Kattar. Great win. We love you, Calvin Kattar, here at South Tampa Jiu-Jitsu. We love Calvin Kattar. We love the New England Cartel boys. Aljamain Sterling will probably... I think he should keep his ranking where it is. I don't see any reason for... maybe you could swap Calvin Kattar and Lerone Murphy for 10 and 11, and then put Sterling at 10 and put Lerone Murphy maybe even at 9. But I don't think that's the way to do it. I think Aljamain Sterling should stay right where he is. And Movsar Evloev, at 5, coming in at 5 here, who does Evloev fight? A lot of people want Diego Lopez to fight Ilia Topuria for the belt next at featherweight. I say give that fight to Evloev. Evloev is undefeated. Evloev beat Diego Lopez. Granted, it was a short notice fight, but he beat Diego Lopez, and casuals will tell you that wrestling is not a fun style to watch in the UFC or in MMA. And, there's a lot of hate for Russian MMA on MMA Twitter. I don't really buy into that. I think it's fucking hilarious though. Props to my boy Durain too. Durain called it. Durain sent me a fucking hilarious text. Yesterday morning, I was walking into the gym to teach my teens class, and teens MMA boys. We were talking with the boys, and I were talking about the fight too. Durain's like, Aljo has trouble against these guys. Evloev's undefeated, and he has, this style is rough. Put your money on that Russian inbred fuck. And we do not endorse the comments made by Durain on the Fightcraft podcast here, but we do laugh at them because they are fucking hilarious. I cackled at that. I woke up to that text actually, and we were talking about the fights as I walked in to teach my class. I think give Evloev the fight against Topuria and give Diego Lopez, give him Yair Rodriguez, give him Volkanovski. Volkanovski has talked about moving up to 155. I think he does fine there in a top 15, top 10 sense, but he's a small boy, and I know he played rugby and he was over 200 pounds. I get that. That was a lot of juice ago, and he might still be on juice. I don't care if he does, if he is, but I think let's give Volk not a tune-up, not a break, but let's give him let's have Volk take a step back from fighting the best in the world, you know? Topuria, Holloway, Islam, and obviously he beat Holloway, but it's like, give Volk a breather. Let him fight another contender, a legit contender in Diego Lopez, and let's give Movsar his shot. Let's give Movsar his shot here. You could do Volk versus Yair Rodriguez. You could do Yair versus Diego. You could do Movsar versus Rodriguez if you want to go that route. I say fuck it. We had undefeated versus undefeated in the co-main of this event. Let's do undefeated versus undefeated again. Ilia Topuria versus Movsar Evloev, and let's see someone's O go. Yeah, that is pretty much all I have to say about that. I think Aljamain Sterling should fight Bryce Mitchell. I think you should fight Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell has been hovering around that like top 10, top 15 area, and let's give him a real step up. You know, Aljo lost this fight, whatever you happen to think. He did lose this fight. He's established at least where he is in the division to some extent, right? If you want to say that Evloev won that fight, I think it was a close enough fight that I don't think it's the most egregious decision. I think it's just fucking crazy that Adelaide Bird gave him those rounds personally, but I mean, it was a close enough fight to where it's like you don't mind either one of those guys winning and taking the L in the sense, you know, it sucks that they're not getting paid as much, or now they're getting a huge setback, but you know, it wasn't like Movsar got outclassed and then they gave it to him and everybody's like, what the fuck, you know, but there's certainly a little bit of what the fuck. But I think Aljo and Bryce Mitchell makes sense. You know, Bryce elbowed Kron Gracie into oblivion, and I think that is a solid comeback from his brutal knockout against Josh Emmett. But let's give Bryce a grappler that knows how to strike on the feet. That's a tough fight for Bryce against Aljo. Tough enough fight for Aljo as well. I think Aljo would have that one, but it makes sense where they are in the rankings, and it just kind of makes it feels like it'd be a fun fight too. You know, I think Aljo finishes Bryce Mitchell, but Bryce Mitchell has that dog in him too, and his striking has come. It's still a little bit sloppy, but it's come, you know, pretty far. It's kind of a boring fight with Kron leading up to the finish, but hey, them's the facts. That's MMA. Oh man, we got to talk about this one for a second here. Vicente Luque defeats Themba Gorimbo by submission, anaconda choke in the first minute of the first round. I mean, what a fucking performance by Vicente Luque. And it wasn't long. It wasn't like he styled on him and we saw all these new wrinkles in his game or something. But, I mean, we just saw some really interesting stuff. From him in this fight, like a almost perfect performance. So how did they set up how did the finish come about here, right? They're on the feet, and they both throw that rear Luque is southpaw. I think they're both southpaw. They both throw their rear hand lead. They both throw that cross. No, they're both orthodox. They both throw that cross, right? No jab to set it up, just the cross. Again, we talked about this, a little bit more travel time, thus creating a little bit more of an opening for your opponent to see what's coming. But when they're throwing that their own cross simultaneously, and more importantly, when they're in that closed off stance, right, where it's orthodox, or southpaw, you're a little bit closer, and it's also a little bit easier to slip traditionally, right? You got to be careful slipping when it's orthodox against a southpaw, because the southpaw could throw that cross and then have the head kick coming right up by it and then slipping to the other side. You know, what if they change that cross to a hook or something, and you saw both of them throw the cross at the same time, and the difference here was that Vicente Luque didn't step in. He was planted. And Gorimbo stepped in or leaned in just a little bit. I'd have to watch the tape again. I don't think I could quite see their feet when I was watching the broadcast. Gorimbo throws his cross, and it misses because Luque slips to the outside. Luque slips to the outside, and his cross nails Gorimbo and drops him. Luque immediately hops on the choke, right? Gets the front headlock, slides his arm through. So for the anaconda choke, you want to have your arm go, think of like a seatbelt, right? Where it goes on one side of the neck across the chest to out the opposite side armpit. And Luque slaps that, hits that cross, Garimbo drops, Luque drops, sprawls down onto him, right? Onto his back to keep his weight on him, slides that hand through. You see it come out underneath Garimbo's opposite side armpit, and he immediately locks in the choke, settles it for a second, drops for the roll, and then Garimbo, usually you want to push the hips away a little bit, and you want to start trying to, obviously you want to protect your fucking neck at all times. You want to start working your way out of that choke. If that choke's on tight, you really got to get the arm that's here, this one, you really got to start prying that down to loosen their grip, but also start opening up a window for escape here, right? Because when you have this slapped in, it's a matter of sliding your arm up to your shoulder. Some people go like this. I like to slide. I have really long arms, really skinny long arms. So I like to slide my hand up to my shoulder, grab the back of my shoulder if I can, and then look at this space here, right? You're locking up the choke like this, and as you slide up, that space closes down more. If you're sliding like this, the space can close down more, but look at the direction that it goes. Here to here. I try to correct my boys and teens MMA on this all the time because it's going to be more secure, it's going to be a tighter choke, and it's really going to make them feel the pressure. They're going to immediately go for their choke, for your choking arm if they're smart, and then that gives you time to drop down and hit the roll. Vicente Luque hits the roll, and they're on the back, and he's got his head and neck on his chest, and he's going for it, and then he kind of flips over, he starts walking his feet. Garimbo might have been reaching to kind of keep the hips away, so Vicente Luque couldn't start really compressing that choke down, because when you're on your side, you want to kind of want to hook their legs a little bit if you can. Sometimes you want to. You know, it's not like the perfect rule of thumb here. There's different ways to finish this, different ways to skin a cat. But you saw Luque kind of trapping Garimbo's arm, his hand at least, in between his thighs. Not even tightly trapping, just kind of got stuck there. And then with the gloves, it's a little bit hard to get out. And Luque, as Garimbo is thinking about what to do, probably dazed from the cross, probably still trying to figure out what he had, defend the choke, keep his hips away, start rolling, trying to get my head to the other side and then to the mat. You're losing oxygen the whole time that all of those thoughts are happening, and the whole time that you're trying to execute that defense and then escape. And Luque has a grip like a motherfucker. You can tell he's got all these Darce choke finishes in the UFC, all these submission finishes, and a couple anacondas too. And I saw some confusion on the broadcast, maybe not on the broadcast, on the one of the sites that the results were coming up. I think they said this on X, and then I checked MMA Junkie, and they had it listed as well. They had it listed as a Darce choke. I got to be careful here because I cannot show I can't show the fight, otherwise I'll get pulled, and it's kind of tough because I have a bunch of clips that I shared on X because X is a little bit nicer about the copyright, so we'll go right up here. You had a lot of people saying that it was a Darce choke. It is not a Darce choke. There are two sides of the same coin, and I wanted to clear this up. The two sides of the same coin, right, with the Darce choke, because they have one arm trapped into a head and arm choke, similar to like an arm triangle. You have one arm in, and the choking arm is coming around the other side of the neck. And when you're tightening up that choke, your shoulder is clenching against their neck. You see how my voice changes when we do that? The tighter you get this choke, right? You don't necessarily have to, once this is locked in deep enough, you don't have to worry about it as much. You want to worry about making sure this side doesn't slip out, and you want to make sure it's correctly here, right? You don't want their shoulder here. You want their shoulder up against that other artery, and their voice starts changing. Two sides of the same coin, but distinctly different, right? The anaconda sometimes has the roll. You can totally get the anaconda choke without that roll. That roll is commonly used as the setup. And it's a beautiful choke. It's probably my favorite choke. It used to be the triangle choke, but I don't like fighting from, I got good at one or two things in jiu-jitsu for the first like year and a half, 2 years that I was doing it. I mean, I was one of those skinny, tall guys who didn't have a lot of weight on him and didn't have the wrestling pedigree. And so, a lot of that, those first months, years in jiu-jitsu was me kind of learning jiu-jitsu, learning the broad strokes of the game, and then trying to find what could be my strength. And the triangle choke was the first one that I did. Another arm in choke where your leg is here instead of your arm, and they have their other arm cutting off the artery. And I developed that, and then I started being able to fight and work off of that and get better at like the Darce, the Anaconda, those head and arm chokes where you get to you have if you're a longer guy, lankier guy with long limbs, you can definitely find a lot of good situations to dive for those. I love the Darce choke. I really love the Anaconda choke, and again, they're two sides of the same coin. I find that the Anaconda just comes a little bit easier, and I think I like that roll to kind of add a little bit of chaos, a little bit of confusion in there. And I know what's going to happen on the other side of that roll, so I'm going to initiate it right away. And opponents might also know what happens after the roll, but maybe they don't know when the roll is coming, so it gives you another element of the game to dictate and then carry out on. So if I choose, once I have my arms locked in, if I choose when to hit the roll, then I'm setting the pace there, and you're kind of playing catch up. And so that is why I love that choke. And, Vicente Luque clearly loves that choke too. Number of Darce Anaconda chokes. Let's see how many he has here. Vicente Luque has 4 Darce chokes. The Silent Assassin. He has now 3 Anaconda chokes and 4 Darce chokes in the UFC. And I mean, wait, how many Darce chokes does he have, actually? There might be more. We might have to just go to his record real quick and check this out, because Vicente Luque, he has a real affinity for these chokes, and he's not the skinniest guy. He's certainly not the biggest guy, but it's just cool to see his ability to adapt these for his game. And you love to see it, dude. You really do. So let's take a look at his profile here. Okay, Anaconda, Darce, Anaconda. Yeah, so 4 Darces, right? 4 Darces and 3 Anacondas. I mean, personally, super high on that. I love that. Vicente Luque, I mean, what else can you say for him? It was a great pass of his test, and let's see, is he ranked at welterweight currently? He should be. He's currently ranked at 14 at welterweight. I'd like to see him start working his way back up, He's coming off of the win of Garimbo, obviously, and then a loss to Joaquin Buckley, and then a win against Rafael dos Anjos, lost to Jeff Neal, lost to Bilal Muhammad, and then, it kind of goes down from there. He did beat Randy Brown, Michael Chiesa, and Tyrone Woodley as well. The last 2 of that, both by Darce choke. I say give Luque a shot at, he's in the top 15. I would love to see a rematch with Jeff Neal. He lost to Jeff Neal. He lost to Stephen Thompson. Give him one of those rematches. Give him a shot to earn back some of that shit. But if not, a fight that would be an absolute barn burner is Vicente Luque versus Gilbert Burns, and I would love to see that. Both of them with excellent jiu-jitsu and crazy striking on the feet. Moving on here. Duho Choi defeats Nate Landwehr by TKO of round 3 to strikes. This was not as much of a toss-up as I thought it was going to be leading up to this. I didn't know, and it was largely because of Duho Choi. You didn't know what he was going to have. He had a 2-year layoff because he had to go serve in the Korean military, and then he came back and, I think lost one, won one. Let's take a look. Here. He beat Bill Algeo in 2024. And then he had that draw against Kyle Nelson and canceled fight against Danny Chavez, lost to Charles Jourdain back in 2019. I think that was before his military service, so I kind of am not counting things before 2021 when he came back. Canceled fight, but he was back and ready to fight in 2021. Draw against Kyle Nelson, win against Bill Algeo, now a win against Nate Landwehr. The Korean Superboy, bro, came back, and I wasn't sure what to expect, and he passed that test with flying colors. Great, fun fight. Landwehr wasn't exactly outgunned in terms of power, but he was overwhelmed, I think, a little bit. Doo-Ho Choi had an answer for a lot of stuff that Nate Landwehr had, and so Doo-Ho Choi should come back and give us another good fight, and let's see him start working his way. He's not ranked currently. I'd like to see him fight someone. I'd like to see him make the rankings after that fight, but 45 is almost as stacked as 55. I would love to see Doo-Ho Choi against Bryce Mitchell. I know I just said Aljamain Sterling, but you can kind of play mix and match with these guys at featherweight. Dan Ige would be a great fight. Giga Chikadze would be a great fight. I haven't seen him in a minute. Doo-Ho Choi versus Calvin Kattar would be a great fight. Let's get him in there and let's get him active. The guy is not exactly older, but he's not the youth in the UFC anymore, and so I would love to see Doo-Ho Choi get a good fight there. This is what I wanted to talk about. Bryce Mitchell defeats Chrome Gracie in round 3. 40 seconds left on the clock, and it was a KO by an elbow, and it was a kind of boring fight leading up to that. Not boring in the sense that I wasn't entertained. Of course, I'm interested in watching, and when you're watching a fight live and you're really not sure how it's going to play out, it's kind of this sense of anticipation. Anything could happen, and anything did happen. On a long enough timeline, something's going to happen, and Chrome Gracie makes the decision to pull guard on Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell slams him. I don't think there was too much damage to the back of Crone's head in that slam, so it wasn't like he was dazed. It wasn't like a rampage slam. And you saw this when Bryce, I think, was in his guard earlier in the fight, and he's hitting Crone in the side, and he's trying to hit him in the head, kind of like head down, hitting Crone in the head. And those strikes will definitely still count, and they'll definitely still they'll do something, but you don't have as much of a position or torque to really get something in there. And Bryce Mitchell, you could tell, changed the game plan a little bit when he was in this position, because he does 2 or 3 little soft ones to the body, and then he postures up and slams an elbow into Crone's head. And that one really, Crone was probably out from that one, and I think he gets a second one in there, and Crone Gracie is, I feel like I saw his hand moving a little bit, but Crone was out. And Bryce Mitchell gets the knockout win on his record. After a brutal knockout loss to Josh Emmett, Bryce was twitching on the camera, seizing up. It was actually it was kind of scary to watch, regardless of what Bryce Mitchell thinks about any number of things outside the cage. But Bryce Mitchell back in the win column. What do you do with him? I've already said I think he should fight Aljamain Sterling. I would love to see him fight Doo-Ho Choi. That's not what I wanted to talk about with this fight, though. I wanted to talk about Chrome Gracie here. I wanted to say something that I said on Twitter, on MMA Twitter last night, X, as it's often called. When I was starting in jiu-jitsu and kickboxing and MMA or whatever, I was a huge fan of Chrome Gracie. Who was only a submission grappler at that time, and he competed in IBJJF too, but I was a big fan of Chrome Gracie. I loved Rickson Gracie. I loved that documentary Choke with Rickson Gracie from the late 80s or 90s, where he goes on follows him as he goes on this Vale Tudo, no holds barred kind of tournament in Japan, and beautiful representation of not the samurai, not the Bushido. I think that shit is kind of bullshit. It's for the casuals. But a beautiful representation of martial arts, and even more so Brazilian jiu-jitsu at the time. Rickson Gracie was doing shit that no one else was doing. He was doing yoga. He was doing pranayama, like that breathing, and he had a sense of control and just chillness about himself. Paired with physical gifts and just athletic diligence and just hard work in the gym and going out there against all odds and fighting people. And his oldest son, passed away, and Crone is his youngest son. And Crone talks about having talked with his brother. And Crone was a kid. He wanted to get into skateboarding and doing whatever. Growing up near like Venice Beach in California, and he goes, one of the last talks I had with my brother before I took jiu-jitsu this seriously was my brother said, "You will be great at whatever you do in this world, but you have the opportunity to be truly great truly one of the best at something like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You're in the right family. Our father is Rickson Gracie," and Crone kind of took it seriously and takes up his father's mantle and is a prodigious black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and wins the world championships in ADCC and has this amazing super fight with Gary Tonin. I mean, submission attempts from both guys back until the last second. Gets an arm and, maybe losing the match on points, and gets out of a bad rear naked choke by Gary Tonin and gets up and looks at his dad in the crowd, and Rickson Gracie goes, "You got 1 minute left on the clock." And you got 1 minute, and Crone takes a deep breath and goes in, gets Gary down, and taps him with a beautiful tight arm bar at the last second of the match, and showed his brilliance in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This was right as the world was about to find out who Gary Tonin was, before the leg lock meta, this wave of leg lock meta came in, and Crone is an amazing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu grappler, and then tried his hand in MMA and went to ONE FC, and fought in Japan, had some good fights there, and there was a lot of hype when he came into the UFC, and just has not lived up to it, and has not adapted his game for the UFC. I talked about with Mackenzie Dern, coming from a pure jiu-jitsu realm and not adapting your jiu-jitsu game for MMA, not really getting better at those wrestling exchanges, not adding any striking to it. And Crone added a little bit of those things to it, but just this traditionalist mindset, like, no, I'm going to do it the way my family taught me to do it. We created this. We adapted this. We are the best. We are the name and the best at this, and I'm going to uphold that tradition. And did that in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu too, where he wasn't into the new wave stuff that was coming out. He just did it his way, that old school traditional way, and had great success in it. And in MMA, there's a lot less margin of error to not be adapting at all times. The game will pass you by in a couple of months, let alone years. And that's what we saw over the weekend with Bryce Mitchell. And I made the case on my X profile. I made the analogy rather. Crone Gracie is very much the last samurai in a world that is discovering gunpowder, and you saw him pay for it. And so that's sad. I think Crone Gracie gets cut. I think he should get cut from the UFC. I think he should go back to ONE FC in Japan, and I think he should rematch Gary Tonin in MMA. A rematch of their Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu match all those years ago, and excuse me, I hope that he makes some changes if he is going to continue to fight MMA. As of right now, I would like to see that fight, and I would have Gary Tonin in that fight. I don't know what else to say about that one. It was a little bit bittersweet. Cyril Gane defeats Alexander Volkov by split decision. That one, I think, was a robbery. I think Volkov added a ton of elements to his game, striking elements that you didn't. I personally, I wasn't sure if he was going to make any progression. He's been around for a minute now. He tends to make these weird mistakes or just get caught off guard by guys. I'm thinking about that Derek Lewis knockout where there was like 4 seconds or like 10 seconds left on the clock. He was winning the fight. Derek Lewis sleeps him. And Volkov, I thought, earned this one. And Cyril Gane, when he was in the position to win, he sat back for a leg lock again, displaying the same mistake that he made against Francis Ngannou in a fight that he was winning that he eventually lost. Of course, he won this one. I don't think justifiably. Cyril Gane sitting back for a leg lock, showing piss IQ, and I don't know what to say about that one. That's the kind of mistake you should only make once, if ever. You should make that in the gym, not in a professional fight, certainly not in a title fight. And this was, then he made it again in this like kind of runner-up contender fight. I don't know what you want to say, right? Tom Aspinall is, by all accounts, the number one contender. He is the interim champion, but he's the next guy to fight John Jones if there's someone at heavyweight to fight John Jones. And Cyril Gane got a win that I personally don't think he deserved and displayed piss IQ in that win. And so you got to wonder what's next for him, obviously in terms of matchups, but what's next for him in his development? He's a creative striker, has been since I've watched him, and uses his attributes on the feet very well. Getting guillotined by John Jones is not something that you can knock him for, really, because John Jones has a great guillotine. Think about Lyoto Machida, and then also is John Jones and has a great wrestling pedigree to set up those submissions and has great killer instinct. But Cyril Gane, having lost his fight before this by submission and then displayed terrible grappling and submission IQ and technique and caliber in this fight, I wonder if he's making these leaps and bounds that he needs to be in the training room, right? That could just be something that he does because he's like, fuck it, I'm going to try it. Maybe he thought he was winning and he's like, fuck it, I'm going to go for a finish. Why that finish? I don't know. Why not ground and pound? Why not an arm triangle? I don't know. But very disappointed in Cyril Gane's performance as a fan, right? What the fuck is my disappointment worth for these guys who are champions and warriors out there going out there and doing the damn thing? But as a dude who knows jiu-jitsu at least a little bit, like teaches it to the kids, baffling that decision there. Gane, I think, who does he fight next? Let's take a look at the rankings here, if we may. The rankings again. And Gane's sitting at 2, right? It's Jones, Aspinall, and then Gane, and then Volkov was 3. It's like he might as well just sit out and wait for a title shot against whoever wins the Aspinall-Jones fight if they make it. If Jones vacates the belt, let him fight Aspinall. I would love to see that fight. I think Aspinall wins that fight based on what we've seen in the last 2 fights from Gane, last 3 fights from Gane. Not last 3, but 3 of his last couple fights, against Francis and then Jones and then now Volkov. I don't know. And then what do you do with Volkov? What do you do with Alexander Volkov, who I think should have won that fight? He beat Pavlovich. He beat Tuivasa. Beat Romanov. Beat Rosenstrike. Lost to Aspinall. So it's like, damn, dude, you lost to the interim champ, the number 2 contender, and so you really don't have a shot to call out John Jones? I don't know, man. I don't know. I think Volkov should take a good matchup, or he should demand a rematch with Cyril Gane. I wouldn't mind seeing them headline like a fight night card or a co-main event in 5 rounds and see what Volkov can do. But it's tough when he just fought that guy and he lost, Bad decision it may be. Shavkat Rakhmonov defeats Ian Gary by unanimous decision, 48-47 across the board. Shavkat Rakhmonov won, stays undefeated. Ian Gary is the star. He has all the hype after this fight. Ian Gary surpassed expectations, I think. He's an undefeated fighter. He was an undefeated fighter coming into this as well, but I wasn't sure about his finishing ability. I wasn't sure about his offensive prowess. He has a great jab lead leg kick, jab front kick. Shavkat had all these finishes and a perfect record and just a mindset, and you saw Ian Gary go in there and stifle him. What Colby Covington does offensively, Ian Gary does defensively. Let me explain. Colby Covington takes your tools away and makes you, when he's fighting his best fight, you see him stifling people and freezing them and not giving them a chance to get their head above water, and he really dictates every sense of the fight, and they can't get anything off. But Shavkat had definitely some good scrambles here, definitely good like body locks and stuff. I think a good takedown in that last round too. But Ian Gary defensively kind of forced Shavkat to go to his B game, and I think that is really, really impressive from Ian Gary. And you wonder if that was training with Charles Oliveira. You wonder if that was just, he's a young guy. He's surging, and he does have that constant learning mindset. And he was also a training partner of Shavkat. And then the pressure of going against Shavkat, and no one thinks that you're going to beat him, really. I wonder, Ian Gary rose to the occasion, lost, and he should hold his head high because Ian Gary proved that he is the real deal. He belongs in those top 5 at welterweight. And, I have nothing but good things to say about Ian Gary. Almost finished the fight. The oh shit moment in the fight came from Ian Gary. Shavkat eked out each round and won the fight fair and square, but yeah, Ian Gary was the guy who got the hype after that. Shavkat's going to fight Bilal next. I think Ian Gary should fight Jack Della Maddalena or Leon Edwards, and let's see what he can do next. Pantoja versus Kai Asakura. It went down how I thought it would, not in the result, but in terms of I don't think this fight is going to go to the decision, and I think it's going to be a barn burner for as long as it lasts. I think I called second round finish, maybe third, but Pantoja is the one at 125. Goes in there, took a good knee from Asakura, and gets Asakura down, right? He has this body lock against the fence, controlling Asakura. And when Asakura scrambled out, Pantoja leapt on his fucking back like a monkey and just locked in that choke, locked in the body triangle and the choke, and choked Asakura unconscious. Japan now 0-7-1 in title fights in the UFC. I think Luke Thomas had that stat. That's where I got it from, and then I think he got that stat from someone else. But excellent performance by Alexandre Pantoja. Who does he fight next? What the fuck do you do with this guy? Pantoja called for Demetrius Johnson after this fight, but I gotta say, man, and Demetrius was like, fuck no, you're not getting my black ass back in the cage. He's done. He's not even thinking about training. He makes better money off of YouTube, supposedly. Who does Pantoja fight next? Let's see. Let's take a look at the flyweight rankings and Pantoja's record. Who's he already beaten? He beat Asakura, Steve Erceg, Brandon Royval, Brandon Moreno, Alex Perez, Brandon Royval again, Manel Kopp, lost to Askar Askarov. That was the one that I was saying. Get Askar Askarov back and bring him in. But it's can you really make a case for that? Beat Davison Figueiredo. Beat Wilson Hayes. Beat Brandon Moreno a few times. What do you do with Pantoja? Truly, what do you do with Pantoja? The guy is fucking good. There's a case to be made for him going up in weight, but bantamweight is busy as it is, dude. Bantamweight has enough contenders. I know there's not movement right now with Merab to fight any of those guys again, right? To fight Piotr Yan again, to fight Sean O'Malley. He is going to fight Umar Nurmagomedov. That fight was announced for 311. But, what do you do? Let's take a look at his record here. What? No. Pantoja is so fucking good, dude. Beat Brandon Moreno twice. Beat Brandon Royval twice. Beat all the other contenders too, save for Askar Askarov, and he is not in the UFC. Let me fact check that too real quick. Yeah, he's in ACA is the division that he's in. Alex Perez was the other great kind of top contender at flyweight, and it's he's already beaten him once. He's beaten Royval and Moreno twice, beat Steve Erceg, beat What the fuck do you do with Alexandre Pantoja? I have no fucking idea. I really don't. And I mean, okay, Kai Kara France, yeah. He hasn't fought Kai Kara France yet. Let's see. What's that? What's Kai Kara coming off of? A win against Steve Erceg, but doesn't really have a leg to stand on in terms of him getting the fight now. Beat Askar Askarov, lost to Moreno, lost to Abazi, beat Erceg. I mean, I guess Kai Kara France is the next for Pantoja. Maybe Amir Albazi? They haven't fought yet. Maybe Amir Albazi. Let's see. What's his record looking like? Split decision to Kara France. Lost to Moreno. It's like, fuck, dude. I mean, he's on a good little streak here, though. Beat Figueiredo, beat Kai Kara France, lost to Moreno, so he's coming. I mean, I guess Kai Kara France versus Pantoja is your next fight at flyweight. If you give Albazi one more and he gets a win, you could make the case that, like, we need a contender. Fuck it. But, I mean, Alexandre Pantoja quickly coming into that era that Demetrius Johnson was in, where it's like he's beating everybody and he's beating the rematches too. So what do we do with him? I don't know, man. Pantoja, fucking the cannibal, and absolutely deserves every letter in that nickname, dude. Feasting upon flyweights all over. And humble enough, dude. How about this? Someone at the press conference asks Pantoja who his top 5 flyweights are. Let me see if I can pull it up. Doesn't have himself as number 1. I know his top 3 goes, I'm number 3. I think Henry Cejudo is number 2, and Demetrius Johnson is number 1. Like, that is so fucking cool. Like, how cool of a guy who is the best in the division to not think that he's the best, like to not have this casual take and immediately start saying, I deserve a money fight, I'm the best there ever was, whatever. Pantoja official ranking here. Let's show it. Demetrius Johnson, Henry Cejudo, himself at 3, Figueiredo at 4, Moreno at 5. Guy who's got, last 2 he's got wins over. I think, and he called out Demetrius Johnson. Demetrius doesn't want that fight. As a fan, I don't really want that fight. I don't know what to say. Coming up on 122 here, so we'll go ahead and get to the ending. We have a couple of announcements. Dricus du Plessis is going to fight Sean Strickland for the middleweight title. And that's going to be, first off, that's an interesting one. I think Hamzat should have that, really, but okay. Okay, that's fine, I guess. She's gonna fight Tatiana Suarez versus Zhang Weili for the women's flyweight belt is the or the women's strawweight belt is the next one. I have Zhang Weili and Dricus du Plessis in both those fights. Sean Strickland, great performance against Izzy. Interesting performance against Strickland, against du Plessis rather, the first time, but I did have du Plessis winning that one. I don't know. I honestly think Chimaev should have the title shot. I think now he's earned it. He was either missing weight or fighting up and down at welterweight and middleweight and not fighting contenders. I mean, at middleweight, I think it was a catch weight for Kevin Holland when he fought Kevin Holland. Because he was like 179 and he missed weight for his Diaz fight. And then Holland, I think, was coming in at 170. So he was like, all right, fuck it. I'll just fucking fight Hamzat. Defeats Kevin Holland with like no damage on him in the first round, rear naked. Fights Usman, short notice at middleweight. Usman, pound for pound, coming off of pound for pound number 1, still a great fighter, pound for pound, but like 6 or 8 days notice at up a weight class against a guy like Hamza who's been training, and then his legitimate win in the way of fighting Rob Whittaker in a first-round rear naked choke where he caved Whitaker's fucking teeth in, proving he is still the truth. I gotta say, Khamzat should probably have that 185 title shot, but if they're going to give it to Strickland, fuck it. Whoever wins that, Khamzat should fight that. And I mean, I wouldn't be mad at Khamzat fighting once more, right? Getting one more true contender where there's no issues. He doesn't miss weight. It is at middleweight, so that way there's really no question as to who he is. Now, Izzy is going to fight Nasruddin Imavov, so I don't know who you give Whitaker. Kyle Baralho would be a fun fight for as long as it lasts, but I mean, I would have Khamzat. I would have Khamzat over everybody except for Adesanya and Duplessis. Like in my mind, I would pick them. I don't know if he would win. I think those are the questionable fights, right? Like guys who have a chance at beating him. I thought Whitaker, maybe if they rematch, Adesanya, and probably Duplessis. I don't think Strickland beats him. But whatever, we'll see. That is all I have. Hannah is texting me, and my boss is about to rip a recording, so I'm gonna have to edit. So go ahead. Tell me what you think. How was UFC 311 for you? Was it as good for you as it was for me? It was awesome. Tell me what you think the next matchup should be. If you could, subscribe to this channel, leave a like, leave a comment, share it. That really helps with the algorithm, and it, more than my ego or whatever, it helps with the algorithm, helps me getting seen a little bit. And follow me on X, dude. I was popping the fuck off on X last night, and there was some good engagement. I was having fun. Not too many salty trolls either, so it was all fun shit. People were laughing at my dumb jokes, so I think that's pretty cool. Definitely like a realm for either political posting because of my job or just like MMA shit posting. I meant waxing poetic, much like I do here on X. So go ahead and follow me there at Klein Wong on X or Instagram for as long as I decide to keep that public. I kind of don't like having that much of my life out there. But yeah, definitely subscribe, please. I would appreciate that. Please. Have a great night.